In 2023, Uganda created an LGBTQ bill. It was kind of on the table for a long time, but it got signed into power by President Museveni. And what the bill wanted to do, make harsh and strict laws towards anybody participating in LGBTQ activities. And I believe some of the penalties are up to death. And here's a clip of that actually coming into play.
This was the moment Uganda's anti-homosexuality bill was passed into law.
Those in favour say and contrary nay.
Despite being watered down, the new laws are amongst the harshest in the world.
When you carry out acts of homosexuality through force or duress or undue influence, then the law defines that as aggravated homosexuality. And what is the punishment? The maximum punishment is death.
And the penalty for Uganda was quite harsh. First of all, the United States denounced Uganda's decision to do such. Uganda was kicked out of the AGOA program, which is the African Growth Opportunity Act, which pretty much acts as a duty-free trade for Uganda to sell its products to the United States duty-free. It made about $8.2 million from that opportunity last year, but being kicked out of it, there is no future opportunity to make money and make that number grow up in the future. Also, many of their officials got their visas restricted from entering the United States. Pretty harsh penalties, if you ask me. But stop the show. Seems like Ghana isn't scared because just recently they did the same thing. No more LGBTQ in Ghana. Let's play the clip.
The anti-LGBTQI+ bill has been in Ghana's parliament for more than 3 years. The bill, titled Promotion of Proper Human Sexual Rights and Ghanaian Family Values, proposes up to 3-year jail sentence for anyone convicted for identifying as LGBTQ+. It also criminalizes the advocacy of LGBTQ rights and pushes for up to 5-year jail terms for people convicted of doing so. On Wednesday, Ghana's parliament passed the bill amidst attempts by some lawmakers to replace jail sentences with community service and counseling. The proposed changes, however, were not considered. Polling data suggests the anti-LGBTQ bill is widely supported by Ghanaians who cite cultural and religious beliefs. Ghana's president will now have to sign the bill into law for it to take effect. But human rights organizations say the new bill, when passed into law, will make an already terrifying situation for members of the LGBTQ community much worse.
Now, the person that's spearheading this is the Honorable Samuel George, or Sam George. I believe he's a minister of parliament. And recently he was on Nigerian television and he was asked about, what does he feel about those people who are criticizing him about Ghana's new law?
Come to say that the United States is deeply troubled by the passage of the legislation. And he's saying that this will indeed affect a lot of persons who live in Ghana. What's your thought on his statement, especially looking at the fact that he's saying it could also hamper freedom of speech for Ghanaians?
I'd expect Miller to respect the tenets of democracy, and the entire United States government needs to bear in mind that Ghana is a sovereign country. We are opposed to cultural imperialism. Just 2 weeks ago, the U.S. Department of State, when called upon to intervene in Israel, the Israeli campaign in Gaza Strip, said that it was not the position of the U.S. Department of State to intervene in the local matters of sovereign states. Ghana is not the 51st state of the United States. Ghana is a sovereign state on its own. The sovereign parliament of Ghana has passed a bill, and I think that Matthew Miller should be more interested in the loss of life of Americans' children in American schools to gun violence.
Yeah, you hear what he said? Well, Ghana is a sovereign country. He talks about the fact that the United States says, the United States failed to get into an issue with Israel, citing that it felt it should not intervene into a local issue. Well, this technically is a local issue. It is Ghana making its own decision to do what it is doing. This next question is asked about possible retaliation, like how Uganda received that retaliation, will shock you. Let's see what he says.
Flowing from, this question my colleague has asked, are there concerns about how this might affect relations between Ghana and America? Also, are there concerns about pushbacks, not just pushbacks, but seeing exactly how, Uganda was treated in some measure after they had passed their bill? Are there concerns that Ghana might face that same treatment?
Well, Ghana is a proud African nation, first country in the sub-Saharan Africa to gain independence and lead the light for the rest of Africa. I expect the leaders of our country, the president of our country, to stand shoulder high and tell the American people, you either do business with us on our terms or you can walk. American businesses that operate in Ghana are not in Ghana because of LGBTQ. They're in Ghana because they make a profit. If you're an American business working in Ghana, you turn $100 million in profit every year. If you think that because we are protecting our cultural values and saying no to LGBTQ, you want to lose $100 million in profit, pack up and go. Another company will come into Ghana and do business.
Now, this one is a pretty interesting answer. He says, listen, if they want to do business with Ghana, they can. If not, they can leave. No international business in Ghana because of the LGBTQ. They are there to make profits. So if you don't want to make profits, someone else will do it. But this next comment is probably where we're going to stand on this.
And it's just the sheer hypocrisy of America and the West. Doing business with Saudi Arabia and doing business with Qatar. Qatar spent $22 billion hosting the World Cup in 2022. 18 billion out of those 22 billion went to American and Western businesses. Qatar buys over $1 billion of military hardware every year from America. The punishment for homosexuality in Qatar is death. Nigeria passed a same-sex marriage bill as far back as 2015. In fact, your bill is more punitive than Ghana's bill. In Nigeria, the punishment in your law for same-sex marriage is 14 years imprisonment. The maximum in Ghana's law is just 3 years. Has Nigeria's economy collapsed? Has Uganda's economy collapsed? We need to begin to stand. The American economy would not run and the Western economies would not run without African raw material. I think it's time we begin to look at adding value to our own raw material. Why should Ghanaian cocoa and Nigerian cocoa be traded on the New York Stock Exchange and not on the Ghanaian Stock Exchange and Nigerian Stock Exchange? If we begin to assert ourselves, these guys will know that they have to deal with us on equal terms. They're not doing us a favor. We're doing them a favor. The best doctors in the United States medical system are Ghanaians and Nigerians. The best economists on Wall Street are Ghanaians and Nigerians. They're not better than us. We sit in the same classroom with them and beat them every day. Academically, intellectually, we're better than them. But it's simply because we've not asserted our rights as Africans.
He talks about something that is very interesting. What about these countries who are doing business with the United States that have even harsher penalties? Almost every Islamic country, the penalty for somebody being gay is death. That's true in Saudi Arabia. That's true in UAE. That's true in most countries in the Middle East. And guess what? The United States knows that and accepts that. But hey, as long as you can pay, that's all that matters. And see, there was even a transgender activist that is the first trans artist, I believe, in Ghana. And this particular individual talked about how they were afraid. Let's play the clip.
Thank you.
Now, how did you feel when you heard the results that Parliament had passed this legislation?
I felt devastated. I was heartbroken. I haven't slept. Yes, it's painful to know that your life as a human being is being criminalized. The life you've always struggled for, the life you've always struggled to live. You haven't lived a decent life as any other human being. It's now being criminalized. It was very hard for me.
And this is one of the topics that you sing about in your music.
Yes.
It's become increasingly political over the years, much of it voicing anger at the government in Ghana. Could you tell us a little bit more about your work and the risk that it puts you out at to make music like this?
So my work as an activist is to speak for people who cannot speak. And I am the voice of the community, I would say, because through my songs, a lot of people have gone to understand the struggles that the queer community are going through. And my lyrics and the songs are my lived experiences as a trans woman.
So let's kind of get back to the point here. The reality of it is this. The United States looks at Ghana in a different way than it looks at Saudi Arabia, Egypt, Qatar, UAE. What the United States is saying to Ghana is, listen, well, you are a little boy, all right? You don't get to make your own decisions because you're not rich enough to make your own decisions. Ghana is saying it doesn't matter how rich I am. I am my own man. I want to make my own decisions, even if from time to time I need you. And remember, that agenda was talked about when Kamala Harris visited Ghana just last year.
Madam Vice President, you have made clear that the message of this trip is centered on a collaborative future. At the same time, the Biden administration committed to calling out any foreign government that advanced anti-gay legislation or violates human rights. All three of the countries that you are visiting on this trip have advanced or proposed anti-gay legislation. Ghana has proposed a bill that would imprison those that engage in same-sex intercourse. Gay sex remains a crime in Tanzania, and same-sex relationships are outlawed in Zambia. What have you said to the president and plan to say to other leaders on this trip about this crackdown on human rights?
I'll start. I have raised this issue, and let me be clear about where we stand. First of all, for the American press who are here, you know that a great deal of work in my career has been to address human rights issues, equality issues across the board, including as it relates to the LGBT community. And I feel very strongly about the importance of supporting the freedom and supporting and fighting for equality among all people, and that all people be treated equally. I will also say that this is an issue that we consider, and I consider, to be a human rights issue, and that will not change.
Yeah, Kamala was already trying to spread that thing, right? And the reality is this. In order for us as blacks to make those stances, it comes with this situation. You can't ask for their money. That's something, right? And I understand what the brother Sam George is saying. I understand what the presidents are saying, but you gotta stick by it. Gotta stick by it, right? This will only work if African governments will limit their corruption and run the countries that they have the right way to make these sorts of stances. You cannot be participating in corruption, having failing economies, making these stances, and then you can't back it up, which is probably what the West is betting on. The West is betting on the fact that if you do make this stance, then you will probably mess it up, right? That's probably what they're betting on. But I do like the fact that, hey, this is their position, that they want to stand on what their positions and their values are. That's the same thing that Saudi Arabia is doing, or Oman is doing. The only difference is they have something the United States really needs, and they're kind of afraid or fearful of whatever that retaliation is. They know the Arab world is united, but the black world isn't united. And that's why they're playing bully ball in Africa. And once Africa starts to become more united, the United States will back off on some of the things they're asking other countries to do. When you're fragmented and you're not united, you will see bully ball. And this is bully ball. Not because of what they're asking, but because of how they're asking it. Because they can ask you anything and it can be considered bully ball. But guys, what do you think? It's your boy, O'Shea Duke Jackson, back at it again with another episode of King Uganda. I appreciate you for all you just heard about. We're out.